Great seeing you here again in this new video. In this video I'm going to talk about the resource smoothing. We're going to do an exercise on smoothing, how to smooth resources. First of all, I will give you an overview what resource smoothing is and how we will do it exactly. We will look at the exercise data and then we look at the precedence diagram that we are using for our Gantt chart, and we look at the resources in the initial situation. Then we smooth for Harry Potter, our resource. We look at the first solution where we are reducing slack, and solution 2, we are improving the allocation for Harry Potter. Let's have a look at resources smoothing. Smoothing is about only using slack or float to resolve resource issues. The duration of the critical path activities will not change, but we may create additional critical paths, but the totality, the total project duration will not change. It means that those other critical paths have the same duration as the initial critical path. When we look at smoothing, when we consider the non-critical path activities, they may start later, their duration may be changed, and the combination of the two, start later and change the duration, can also be completed. Everything is okay as long as we don't change the late finish times of the activities. When we change the late finish or the finish times of the activities, we must also look into the action or the reaction on the successors, because the successors of the activities that start later or are taking longer, which have a new finish date, they will have also a different start date. And we have to take all these things into consideration. Here we have the exercise data that we're using. We have the different activities from A to H, their respective durations, the predecessor information. I have the cost per period here, which is not really necessary, but it's part of the exercise. And we see the time, the percentage of the available time that Harry Potter is allocated to the different activities. We look at activity E, there is no allocation. And the first thing we already see is that there is that Harry Potter is never allocated more than 100% to any of those activities. That would already be a first trigger. So we see that Harry Potter is allocated between 20 to 70%, which would be acceptable. The only thing what we don't know is how are those activities positioned relative to each other. When we look at the precedence diagram, we can draw the precedence diagram and we can find the critical path. And the critical path is B, E, G, H. So all these activities have no slack. The other activities have slack. A has a slack of 6 periods, C 13 periods, D 6 periods, and F 9 periods. We will work with this later on. Let's have a first look at the resources in the initial situation. So we just put the HP or the Harry Potter availabilities in the activities. All the activities are in the early start. And what we see is when we add the totality per column, we see that there are issues in the area from period 1 up to period 5. And we see that period 6 has 0.9 or 90%, and all the rest is okay. There is even an overview, or there is a part of the planning from 9 till 12 where Harry Potter is not allocated to anything. So we see that Harry Potter is over allocated in the periods of 1 to 5. A has a total of 6 periods of slack, and we can apply different solutions and combinations. We also must consider that moving and or extending activity A also influences activities C and D, and those are the only activities that will be influenced here. When we look at smoothing for Harry Potter, what are we going to do? Well, we are going to reduce, or we are going to move the first element here. We are going to say that activity A will take 4 periods. 4 periods instead of 2. It means that the allocation is halved, so we only have 25%, and we see when we also look at the 70%, we see the 1.0 on the bottom, but it's basically 95%. It's just the second decimal which is not there. So it would be 0.95 instead of 1, but it's just a small detail. So what happens here, we resolve the problem, and we have no more issue over the periods 1 to 5. The successors C and D are moved into the slack. D is even to period 6, so we have, let's say, the different allocations here, and we find that all the problems that we have here have been resolved. What do we still see here? Well, when we look at all the slack, there is still a lot of slack left. I look at activity C, there is a slack of 9 periods. D, there is a slack of 3 periods. F also has a lot of slack. That's not really good because we can in fact reduce the slack. We resolved the problem for Harry Potter, but now we can have a look at how can we reduce the slack. And what we see here, we're going to move the activity A a little bit further. We look at C, we let C start later into the project at week 13. D is also extended, and we have, let's say, reduced the slack. F is also moved further. We have to be careful here because we could extend this, but at the end we have 3 activities coming together. So we have to see what we can do in this case. And F is after B, so there is no issue for the slack there. So we can play with those, we can find different solutions, and we see that we don't have the total or the high amount of slack. So you see in the bottom what has been done, and basically we've seen that all these actions lead to a better plan. We have less slack, which is more interesting because all the slack is not really practical. One of the issues that can happen, for example, when you finish activity C so early, later on before we need to use activity C or the deliverables created by activity C, they may be damaged, they may be stored for a long time. When we change something, well, the work has been done. It means in order to change it, we may have to redo all the work, and we lost a lot of money. Another element what we can do is to improve the allocation of Harry Potter. A good allocation like we have here is that Harry Potter is evenly utilized over the totality of the project, and Harry Potter is basically working at approximately 70% for most of the time. We can also improve or look at some other elements. Here we have the first topic on the top. We see that when we moved Harry Potter or for activity A, when we moved activity A to start at period 6 to end at period 8, we see that here we don't have any more slack anymore. For activity B, there is also no more slack left. It may not be so good because it may be better to have anyway a little bit of slack left over, so we could play with this, but we have to be careful that we don't over allocate Harry Potter. Another element that we can see here, we see in this case that there is still a lot of slack left, so we could move this to a later period, which would change the even allocation of the slack. It would not be so evenly allocated anymore. So that's the smoothing exercise and different possibilities how we can do smoothing. So, smoothing has been completed on this exercise. That was it for this video. Thank you very much. And in the next video, we will be looking at leveling exercise. Look forward to seeing you in our next videos. Thank you and bye-bye.